That's right, folks. Another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco, and today we're taking a trip to Positive Town, and we're going to talk some 5 underrated fantasy players going in the top 2 rounds. These are studs that you could get pretty much at any draft spot. So join us right now as we talk the top underrated players going in the top 2 rounds, starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. And it's Friday, and just nothing says Friday vibes like a guy who's so popular that you will find him even with 2 underscores. That's Jefferson 2 underscores 21 on Twitter. What's going on, Jeff?
Living life, dude. Football is back. We've got the first games of preseason, and I can't be any happier.
I'm gonna nerd out on some NFL Plus. I'm gonna fast forward, do the 15-second fast forward to see all the snaps of the first team quarterbacks. That'll be a fun exercise. Only me, I think, dreams of just spending their Saturday morning watching preseason film, but I'm looking forward to it, actually. Don't get a chance during the week necessarily to watch it, but I am going to pick it up this weekend to see, like, takeaways. Who's playing with the ones is going to be what's really important. I'm excited to break that down. And honestly, over the last few weeks through training camp, before we dive into the show today, Jeff, I do want to ask you, has there been a training camp storyline that's caught your attention, that's kind of messed around with your rankings a little bit? I know you've been all in on the rookies, but since you've kind of switched away from the rookie analysis, what's a storyline you're kind of focused on right now?
This is a storyline that I didn't think I would be interested in going into training camp, but now that I'm just following Twitter, training camp videos, just kind of seeing what's been developing, it's in Carolina. This is probably going to surprise a lot of people, but I kind of like what Bryce Young and what the Panthers could be cooking in Carolina right now. I love the new head coach, made Geno Smith fantasy relevant, made Baker fantasy relevant. Trade for Deontay Johnson. He's always able to have 2 receivers relevant in fantasy. Now we got Thielen, who last year did catch 100 balls and 1,000 yards, which people don't realize. Now you had Deontay. They get Jonathan Brooks. Maybe he comes back healthy. The big tight end they drafted too. I like him, Sanders. So, I'm interested to see just kind of how they develop and how they go along preseason. And, these could be guys on Styles waiver wire pickup week 1, week 2. For a quarterback. So maybe you get them late in drafts by watching them in training camp and see kind of what they look like in preseason.
Yeah. No, I love that call. That's a good one too, especially when you look at Canales' history. I mean, it's been 2 years in a row now. We get into the season where the quarterback's not exciting. He had Geno, and then the DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett had a great season. Last year was Baker Mayfield. It was Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. And honestly, I did tweet this recently. I said a Chris Godwin season in 2023 for Adam Thielen in 2024 is not that unrealistic. It's maybe just outside the top 36 in PPR points per game, but I can see that being a realistic outcome, especially with the kind of the uncertainty at running back, not a real notable tight end. I know Mingo has flashed a little bit, and they also drafted Leggett in the first round or the second round, but I think that there is a chance they can really become funnel to those 2 pass catchers, and I could see that value as well. My guy is actually Romeo Doubs. I've been really the Packers receiving core is ambiguous. We don't really know who is going to be the wide receiver 1, so you could pretty much get any of these guys outside the top 36 in ADP right now. And to be honest with you, the drum is beating. Romeo Doubs, at least we know, will be almost an every down player. The other 3 guys, we don't actually know that. And I can honestly say with confidence that he will be on the field the most. And if Jordan Love takes the next step and then naturally just props up everybody else, honestly, I kind of want Dobbs. I just want him everywhere. He's super cheap. You could probably get him just outside the top 100 picks right now. So that's a storyline I'll watch. But that's enough of this talk. I brought us on here today to talk about the studs. We're going to talk about the top 2 rounds because, that's what we do here, folks. We're going to talk about the 5 most underrated fantasy football players going in the top 2 rounds. So essentially, almost every one of these guys we're going to talk about today, except for the first one, no matter what draft position you're in, you could get one of these guys on your fantasy team. Now, unfortunately, this is the caveat. The first one, it's Garrett Wilson. And so Garrett Wilson is going probably in the first 10 picks. You might get lucky if he slips to the end of the first round. I haven't really seen much of that yet. But honestly, I am all in on Garrett Wilson. I actually have him 8th overall in my top 150. I have him ahead of guys like Justin Jefferson, for example. I would take Garrett Wilson over him right now. And honestly, it's getting close, but I'm almost thinking about taking Wilson over Bijan with some of the noise going on with Tyler Algier actually being a bigger factor in this offense. But if you just look at the main reason why I'm really in on Garrett Wilson is the Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett combination. We've kind of already seen a 3-year sample size with these guys together in Green Bay and what they can do for an elite target getter. And that example, of course, is Davante Adams. And so a lot of people are going to say Garrett Wilson isn't Davante Adams, but we actually have seen Garrett Wilson, when he's given the opportunities, he's really excelled at owning targets. And what I mean by that is in the 9 games last season, the Jets threw the ball at least 30 passes. He averaged 11.3 targets per game. That is an absurd target percentage. He was at almost 30% target share. That's Davante Adams-esque numbers from the time he was with the Packers under Nathaniel Hackett and also Aaron Rodgers. So that's a 17-game pace, by the way, his 11.3 targets in those games of 193. And honestly, if you look at the landscape, Mike Williams coming off injury, Xavier Gibson just got hurt. I know Alan Lazard is someone that I've put in my top 150 as a late-round dart throw. And Tyler Conklin, yes, I like Tyler Conklin. I'm guilty, okay? I think he's going to earn targets. Like, he's gotten 87 targets 3 straight years. But my mindset here is that there's nobody really on this other offense that's going to earn way over 100 targets other than Garrett Wilson. So if you just look at the passing offensive numbers from the Jets in 2023 versus the 3 seasons with Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett, they averaged, by the way, this is an average. The average number of passing yards more, the 3 seasons the Packers had under this duo versus the Jets last year, 1,000 yards more and 28 touchdowns. Not total, on average. So you're talking about a guy last year who already had roughly 1,000 yards receiving. You're talking a guy who's getting 30% target share. That's a big chunk of production. That could be, 7 to 8 touchdowns and another 300 yards receiving. And now you're talking about an elite upside, maybe close to 20 PPR points per game. Adams finishes in the 3 seasons under Hackett in PPR points per game, 5, 1, and 2. So love the upside, top 5 without a doubt. What's your thought about Garrett Wilson in this one?
Yeah, no, I'm all in on Garrett Wilson. I took him in Rasball with my pick, so that speaks there. I got him at 12 actually.
Get out of here!
Thrilled. Yeah,
Sick pup. I'm here saying you can't get him at 12, and then you're just sitting there going, "Well, I just did it." So
yeah,
God
I got
bless
lucky.
You.
Yeah, no, I got lucky. Just kind of looking at like the same numbers that you did, like 30% team target share. That was 5th among receivers last year, despite the bad quarterback play. Now, those 140 targets with Aaron Rodgers are so much more valuable. And when they do get in the red zone, he was targeted using our new tool we have at Rasball. He was in the 17 games played. He was targeted 33% of the time they were passing in the red zone. Now, he didn't score as many touchdowns, unfortunately, but that's bad quarterback play. But if Aaron Rodgers is throwing his way with that kind of percentage target share, that's just going to mean touchdowns and just more points in fantasy, boosting those numbers up. And so I think we're going to see that breakout that just didn't happen last year. I think everybody was hyped with Hard Knocks. Disappointed. A-Rod got hurt. But I think they're going to get back to it, and I think people are kind of sleeping on that potentially. And then one other stat that I did see, I'm still researching it, but I do want to say it on air like if it's true, but I think he's the only receiver in back-to-back seasons starting his career to get at least 145 targets to open his career. And if that's the case, that's incredible. That's as a rookie getting that, and a second year and third year, that's just going to continue on to be more targets. And you look at the top guys, they're pushing those targets. And dating back to last season, because he was 4th overall in targets at 10 a game, and then there were 6 other receivers that had I think at least 140 targets, and 5 out of those 6 ended up being top 5 scoring. So if his quarterback is back, he's going to be in that top 5, no questions asked, for me at least. So I'm all in on him on the first round. And I'm taking him over
100
A.J. Brown, too.
Yeah, baby. Agreed. By the way, 168 targets, like that's absurd. That's a lot of targets. And by the way, you're right, because if you look at Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase would probably be the first two people to come to mind. They actually didn't have huge target numbers their rookie season. Jefferson was like 125. So love that call out. And by the way, this is the other thing. System continuity. Like last season, the reason why I wasn't as high on Garrett Wilson was because it was the first year of the scheme. If you look at Devontae Adams' numbers under the Nathaniel Hackett offense, even in general, when that coaching staff came in, Matt LaFleur in 2019, he didn't have a monster. He had a good season his first year, but it wasn't until years 2 and 3 where Devontae Adams skyrocketed in that offense. So now that Garrett Wilson knows the offense like the back of his hand, and now he has the master at quarterback, this is the time I'm all in. I'm buying him. Honestly, I might even get him up at 7. But let's turn that to another player. This guy is actually changing teams right now. He's actually one of your favorite players in the first 2 rounds. It's Derrick Henry. Talk to us a little bit about why he's an underrated player going into 2024.
Man, this is going to sound ridiculous, though, but I just love seeing him in that purple and black. I'm not a Ravens fan by any means, but he just looks like a Ravens player looking at him in his new jersey. And so I know early in the year when we did my predictions about what players were going to sign, this was my first guy that I thought he has to go to Baltimore, and he ended up doing it. And he still ended up 8th last season with Tennessee. And I was a little surprised by that because Tennessee they're just not really a fantasy relevant team outside of him. But looking back to the last season with Todd Monken, it was his first year as offensive coordinator since 2019 in Cleveland. And last year, the Ravens ranked 1st in rushing attempts, 1st in rushing yards, and 4th in rushing touchdowns. So he's leaving Tennessee to go to a team that runs the ball more. What's what not to like about a running back doing that? And then the 3 guys that were running the ball for the Ravens last year, Gus Edwards, he scored a career high 13 rushing touchdowns on nearly 200 attempts. And then when looking back at all 3 of the running backs last year that played, all 3 of them were in the top 16 of points and PPR points per touch. So when these 3 running backs touched the ball, they were all top 16 in the NFL. So he's going to take all that workload, which gets me excited. And then looking at some more numbers, when Derrick Henry gets at least 200 rushing attempts, he has scored double-digit touchdowns in 6 consecutive seasons now. So you can probably bookmark this one for 7 consecutive seasons now with them. And then, throwing all these stats, though, but it just looks like he's just a perfect fit in this system. And he's not a PPR guy, obviously, but what I do like as well, if everyone thinks maybe he's a little too older now, according to PPF, he ranks 4th among rushers with 80 carries over 10-plus yards since 21. And you know who's 3rd? Lamar Jackson with 84. So they're not going to be able to put 8 in the box consistently now because they're worried about Lamar Jackson and his rushing ability and the RPO. You got Zay Flowers emerging. You got Mark Andrews over the middle. So taking the safeties a little bit further back now. So there's going to be more running lanes, I think, for Henry, and they're probably going to continue to run the ball. And another stat I did see, too, he's 2nd amongst running backs last season with total yards after contact, only behind CMC. So he still has the juice. So feed Derrick Henry the ball in Baltimore. And I know he's running back 8 at ADP 24, so he's late 2nd round. And I'm comfortable taking him there, maybe not higher, but at that turn 2-3, I'm very comfortable taking him there as my RB1.
So I do want to point out one thing. And yes, the Ravens are always the top of the charts in carries and rushing and attempts, but that's a lot of that has to do with Lamar Jackson. If you look at last year, just running back carries, they're middle of the pack. But it's not based on the Titans versus the Ravens. We're talking maybe 20 carries for the season, one game. It's not a huge issue. But I do want to point out that Lamar Jackson does take away some of those carries because he takes some of them himself. So that being said, doesn't really matter. Derrick Henry's going to be the workhorse. And by the way, the thing I like the most about the situation is a lot of people are going to talk about his age. They're going to say he's 30 years old and he can't do it anymore. And honestly, I think we've seen this with the freaks, the guys that are outliers, like Adrian Peterson, who rushed for, no one thought he could do it. He was like randomly on the Commanders one year,
Mm-hmm.
rushing for 1,000 yards. It made no sense. And he was like 33. It's like, these guys aren't real. No one wanted Adrian Peterson. And I think like every team's like, fine, we'll take Adrian. Oh, wait, he's actually still really good. That's crazy, but we don't want him anymore. It's like they want a younger guy. That's going to be Derrick Henry over the next few years. But this coaching staff under Jim Harbaugh, at least, before, of course, Todd Monken got there, they did this before with Mark Ingram. If Mark Ingram, remember, he left the Saints, he went to the Ravens, he was age 30. He had an awesome season his first year with the Ravens. He averaged over 16 PPR points per game, and he was awesome as an age 30 back the first year in the system playing with Lamar Jackson. So I do think there is a precedent that a guy can come in, older back, they could feed him, he plays well. I'm not stressed about it. I guess really what bothers me a little bit about Derrick Henry, though, is the fact that he's going to be almost a zero in the passing game. They're not going to give him a lot of targets. Now, the flip side to that is I do think the rushing touchdown upside is there, but I don't want people to think that Gus Edwards was bad at that. Like Gus Edwards last year was extremely good at converting carries inside the 5 for touchdowns. And if you go and look at the stats, it's like Derrick Henry was worse, but I get he was on a bad offense, so maybe that was the problem. But Gus Edwards did well. It's not like Derrick Henry is going to score more touchdowns on the same opportunities. Gus Edwards actually was much better than league average. But the other thing that I really like is Derrick, if you go to our slot versus wide tool, if you go to our wins versus losses tool, you go to the splits, by the way, on Razzball.com, and you go check out our new tools over there. There's one called wins versus losses. And Derrick Henry is one of the biggest differentiators in wins versus losses. Last season, he averaged 19.3 PPR points per game in wins, 10.7 in losses. Well, why does that matter? The Ravens went 13-4 last year. If you apply Derrick Henry's numbers to 13-4, he would average 17.3 PPR points per game this season, RB6. So just the game flow, the type of team he's on, is going to probably lock him into a top 10. So I really like that as well. The only downside is that the Ravens are going through a transition on the line. They are going to potentially have 3 new starters. PFF has them 21st in run blocking grade. So I think the difference between the Titans, and if you look at adjusted line yards last year, the Titans actually weren't as bad as people thought, and the Ravens weren't as good. So I think, yes, Derrick Henry's good. I like him in the back of the second round, but I don't know if I'm going to get more aggressive. I don't think he's ever going to touch like the Barkleys, the Jonathan Taylor tier. I'm also higher on guys like Devin Achane, which we'll talk about in a second. Any final thoughts about Derrick Henry before we move on?
You make some good points there too. I'm maybe a little more bullish than some on there, but I just can't imagine being a defensive coordinator having to game plan against those two in the backfield, Lamar and Derrick Henry. So I just see lots of touchdowns, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think in my projections or the thing I do, I think I'm out for 17 touchdowns. So it's all right.
Yeah,
Trust me,
take that.
I'm basically there. So I'm not saying you can't draft him, but at full PPR, he's probably going exactly where he should. All right, let's move on to another guy. It's Devin Achane. And so, listen, it is what it is. I'm all in. This is going to be the egg on the face guy potentially. I have him all the way inside my top 15. I have him ahead of notable players like Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Devontae Adams, etc. I have him ahead of all those guys. And I honestly, the only reason why I don't have him ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs is because of peer pressure. To be honest with you, I would be 100% okay taking Achane over Gibbs. And we can talk about that at a later time, maybe in a bold predictions and crazy call show going on in the next few months. Who knows? Next week. So I'm saying months like we have months. Exactly 1 month away to the season, by the way. Congratulations. We've all made it. But here's the good and the bad about Devin Achane's season last year. The good, he averaged 17.5 PPR points per game. That's basically top 5 running back numbers. In the 9 games, he played over 30% of the snaps. He averaged 21 PPR points per game, folks. In 9 games, 21 PPR points per game. The bad, he missed 6 games, left too early as well. That's also a huge problem. Mike McDaniel has said in his press conferences they want to get him more involved. He's not going to be as low a touch guy this season. I feel like he's going to get more touches. That's going to be good because if you look at the history of Devin Achane, he had an unprecedented season when it came to scoring fantasy points per carry. He averaged over 1.2 fantasy points per carry last year. So that is a lot of fantasy points. And so guys like Alvin Kamara come to mind who had early season career success doing that. There's usually about there's a decent drop off, but still, I think even if you apply a more realistic number to how explosive he was last year, you got to remember when a guy sets a precedent, he's setting a new norm. You can't compare him to an average running back and say, well, league average is 0.6 per fantasy. This is, by the way, points per reception. If you go to Rasball, you'll see my old archived articles. I told Jeff this a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
If you want to see some crazy analysis articles, go to the archives at Rasball. I have some crazy stuff. But anyway, the point is, it's a really interesting exercise because it shows you how many fantasy points these people generate every time they touch the ball. When you have a guy who's this efficient, even when he takes a step back, he's still much better than probably 75 to 80% of the running backs in the NFL. So I think I'm all in, by the way. And this is the upside play. This is the guy who could actually win you your league. And the way he's so efficient, he could easily be well over 20 fantasy points like he showed last year. What's your thoughts here, Jeff?
Yeah, no, he was just really, really efficient. So he was the most efficient player in fantasy a year ago. Now, to bank on that happening again, I don't know, but it's very possible, though, in that system. I do like him in that system. And then I don't know if you knew this, though, but PFF had him as the highest-rated running back last season, too, which is wild. So it's like maybe there is some juice here as well. He had lots of huge games, which you like to see. The home run hitter. I know there was a lot of people are worried about his touches. You know, he averaged 12 touches per game last year, which is still pretty solid. Averaged nine rushes a game, and so I know Mostert got more carries, but Mostert, we all like him. He's older, but he doesn't have the wear on the tires. So
yep.
I think Achane is going to get, like you said, more carries. I like his value. He's RB10, 26 behind Henry. I could see people taking him before Henry, which I don't see why not. Because, like you said, he's going to be the home run guy. That could be a league winner. And then next year, we're talking about him top 5 next year very easily.
So if you just look at the games because he left a couple games early as well. I mean, he was at 14 touches a game in the games where he actually played. By the way, his snap percentages were 30%. You know what I mean? Like the average snaps in those games was 51% on the season, but these are any games, over 39% was the lowest. Anything above that. He had 2 games where he left 4 and 10%. He left with injuries. Now, I think that's really the hang up for a lot of people, and I think if he wasn't in and out of the lineup last year, I can understand maybe people being a little more hesitant. But honestly, like Mostert is one of the things I've noticed over the years, and a lot of people I notice talk about the efficiency of running backs with a mobile quarterback. And honestly, I've done the research. It's not true. Like running backs are not that much more efficient on a per carry basis with a mobile quarterback. Where the impact really comes from is immobile quarterbacks because they're more willing to check down. If you look at quarterbacks historically that run under 100 yards per season, those running backs versus all other quarterbacks. So if the quarterback rushes for under 100 yards versus all other quarterbacks, the running back production is about 4 PPR points per game different. So that's insane. That's a lot of fantasy points different. And the reason why is because they're catching more passes. These guys aren't scrambling. And by the way, every time they drop back, there's only 2 real outcomes. Either they're throwing it or getting sacked. There isn't a third. So Tua is a statue. And which is surprising. You think he'd be a little more mobile, but he's not. So I think there's a world where both running backs, again, can flourish in this offense because of the type of quarterback they have. So even if I take Achane, I'm okay taking Mostert. And I will take Mostert a round or 2 ahead of his ADP. And that backfield is good enough to support 2 guys, and they proved it last year. So and if one of them goes down, you just probably won your fantasy league. And so I'm all in. And if you honestly, this is probably the craziest thing I'll say. If you really are that concerned about, go get Jalen Wright late. All right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Rookie.
All my teams, it's all Dolphins. Let's get out of here before I start drafting Jeff Wilson. Or I get Ricky Williams off the ground. I call him up out of retirement. Before we get too crazy, let's get me out of this. Let's talk about one of your other guys. It's Drake London. He's got a new quarterback, a new OC. Tell us why he's a underrated asset.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about Drake London. I think he's going right now as receiver 12, which is a good place. I think that's where I'd like to take him. But I think he has the upside to beat his ADP at 23 as well. I really like his opportunities now in Atlanta. They got rid of Arthur Smith, the bane of my fantasy existence. And now the OC is Zach Robinson. He's part of the Sean McVay tree, which has always been productive for fantasy. They're more pass friendlier. Back with Arthur Smith, they did not do that. I mean, to date, poor guy only has 6 touchdowns for his career, and he's 6'4" receiver. Like that shouldn't be the case. And so when looking back at the McVay tree with Robinson being the passing coordinator and quarterback coach, was 22-23, and we know how good Cooper Kupp and Nakua is. And as part of the coaching system, the Rams had a top 10 receiver in fantasy 3 out of the 5 years when he was part of that system. So he comes from a coaching dynamic where they like to get their receivers involved, and Drake London is clearly the number 1 option in Atlanta. And in 23, the Rams were 14th in passing attempts, 10th in passing yards, and 15th in passing touchdowns with a veteran like Matt Stafford. Well, what do the Falcons go and do? They bring in a veteran in Kirk Cousins, who coming off a bad injury, but he's still really productive. They paid him a lot, and so he's going to play a lot. And one thing, looking back at Kirk Cousins and his tenure in Minnesota, the top receiver with Kirk Cousins in Minnesota going back to 18 were Stephon Diggs and Justin Jefferson. Those guys combined averaged 9.1 targets a game and 18 points per game in PPR, which would be tied for 10th in targets per game and 6th in points per game in the receiver category. So I think this is the breakout year for Drake London. I think some thought it was going to be last year, but we got bamboozled again by Arthur Smith and his lack of passing and utilizing his best players. Kyle Pitts comes to mind too, but I think this is a year that London does break out in a big way. I've kind of seen some training camp videos of Cousins throwing some dimes to him, and so it's just exciting to see a young guy potentially getting the opportunity to break out and get a lot more targets. It's kind of hard to look at his past 2 seasons and say, well, based on what he's done, he's going to do this. It's a whole new system now. But like I said, 6 touchdowns to date, and I'm going to make a Raz ball guarantee, ladies and gentlemen. A guarantee. Wow. He will have more than 6 touchdowns this season. He will double his career this season. You heard it first.
I don't know if that's that bold.
I know.
You're like, look at me, 7 touchdowns, suck it, world.
I love it.
I called it. Oh, it was me. Oh man, if that happens, we're never gonna live it down, folks. He's gonna be like, Drake London scored 7 touchdowns this year. So first of all, you're right. Obviously, the past, and this is kind of where there's a balance of where you can really find value in fantasies when people get take lock on a player based on some of the historical stats. However, we understand that not only is he getting a new OC, but he is getting the new quarterback. But I do think some of that's already been baked in. This guy averaged 10.7 PPR points per game last year, and now he's going in the top 24. So you're paying the price. You're paying for what we think he should be, which is why I actually have him right in my rankings, kind of right at ADP, because I do agree that you should be taking shots on him. But and so let's talk about the positives. If you look at first, let's talk the quarterback. If you look at Kirk Cousins since he joined the Vikings, 6 seasons, these are the averages for the number 1 receiver: 9 targets per game, 18.7 PPR points per game. That's bueno. That's very good. That's top 5 receiver numbers. That's what you want to hear. Zach Robinson, when he joined the Rams 5 seasons ago, those wide receivers averaged 9.6 targets per game and 19.6 PPR points per game. Let's go. We're talking some big numbers here, folks. Really exciting. Drake London, though, in his career has, and I think if you look at where it's a more realistic number for him, is like, I think 9.6 is a little aggressive, especially in the first season. I also think that because they have really 2 talented running backs and Kirk Cousins is coming off an Achilles injury, I do think they might be a little less aggressive in their first year running and run the football a little more than we expect. So I actually looked at in his career, 23 games where he averaged 6 or more targets. In those games, he averaged 8.4 targets per game and 13.3 PPR points per game. That would have been wide receiver 47. So, that's a lot better than I'm sorry. He was wide receiver 47 last year on a per game basis. Mm-hmm. If you apply those numbers, he would have been wide receiver 30. So, yes, he's clearly locked into, I think, a much bigger and better role. But the issue, I think, is we're paying already for all those positive, turn of events. So I'm in on him in the back of the second. I think I will be taking Cooper Kupp ahead of him, especially because of the ankle injury. to Puka Nakua. I'm sorry, was it the knee? What did he hurt again? I forget. Is it a knee? It's a leg.
Yeah.
It's a leg or something. Yeah.
It's a leg.
I forgot off the top of it. Yeah, it's a leg. It's general vicinity. And then also like Devontae Adams too. I'm still have a little bit higher than Drake London. But last night, by the way, when Jeff sent me his two names, it made me like really think about it. And I actually did move those guys ahead of Puka because of the injury to Puka right now. I did move both these guys ahead of him, especially Drake London. So I'm into it as well. Any final thoughts about London before we move to our last player?
Yeah, no. The Rasball guarantee. I'm sticking to it.
God bless you. All right, we're going to talk about our last player. It's Isiah Pacheco. Another one of my flag plants this year. He's probably if I'm drafting early, first 4 or 5 picks, right? I'm probably going to take, one of the big names, Chase, guys like Tyreek, CeeDee Lamb. I think a wide receiver, and those 3 guys are probably my top 4 outside of CMC. And the back end, the guy I'm praying to get every single time is probably Isiah Pacheco. So if you're looking at Pacheco this offseason and the end of last year, heading into this offseason, quietly has been picture perfect for him. So last year he finishes as RB15, which is awesome, by the way. After the Cheeks, that sounds like a new franchise. Hey, Commanders, if you need a new team, the Washington Cheeks. All right, there you go. That's the next. Keep heading in that direction. All right. So after the Week 10 bye, he averaged 19.9 PPR points per game. Okay. What really happened there was that they moved him all into an every down role. His snaps started increasing. He started getting more passing game work. The offense really started taking off with Rashid Rice heading into a bigger role. He was that would have been RB3 in 2023. So we already saw the breakout. And I think we forgot because Clyde Edwards-Helaire came in and he kind of had the mishap. He wasn't good. Remember, prior to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Andy Reid was known for his workhorses. He had Brian Westbrook for a long time. Then he had Jamal Charles for a little bit. And then if you're just looking at, who was after him? Now I'm thinking about it.
Kareem Hunt's rookie year.
Kareem Hunt, great call out.
My guy. I had him.
Damian Williams flashed for a little bit, but there was I don't think he had. Did he have Shady? Was he with Shady at all? I don't remember. Anyway, the point is he has
maybe
Brian
the back
Westbrook
half of Philly. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like he might have. I don't know. I gotta look into it. It's old notes. Just trust me, people. Okay, feel free to fact check me, leave a comment. I don't care. It's fine. My point is, this is what he was known for a very long time, and I think Pacheco is going to move to this role. Why? Number one, McKinnon's gone, and they don't think they're going to re-sign him. And by the way, they already started phasing him out anyway last year. And CEH, there's reports that he's fallen behind Prince, and Prince is another day 3 back. CEH is probably a depth piece, and I actually think he's going to be the workhorse that, this is what Andy Reid wants. He wants an every down back. And by the way, reports are he's picking up pass pro. He's crushing it. He's doing everything they want him to do. This is a player, by the way, who's tied to Patrick Mahomes. So give me all those you can get. That's why I'm all in. And PFF top 10 offensive line grade. So everything checks a box for him. What's your thoughts about Pacheco?
Oh yeah, no, if I could, I want Pacheco in the 3rd as well. He's RB11. His ADP is kind of odd at 30. I would be comfortable taking him in the 2nd round as well, depending upon how your draft goes. I wouldn't mind kind of reaching for him, honestly. Talking about McKinnon being gone, in 4 games without McKinnon last season, he averaged 21.8 PPR points a game. And it's just like, what are people overlooking? I know they brought in Marquise Brown. I know they got Xavier Worthy. If anything, I think that helps him. Those speedsters are talking about throwing deep. That means safeties are going to be playing further back now. Lots of running room between the low line. If he just breaks off a tackle from the linebacker, like he's just going to have a lot of breakaway runs. And talking about Kareem Hunt, I just remember that year with Kareem Hunt, just how dominant the Chiefs were. I know Patty was kind of coming up, but I don't see why they're not going to turn back to that and just give him the ball. I I looked over his his rushing attempts increased. He went from 170 his rookie year to 205 last year. Substantial, but not a terrible on a per game basis. But I think, he could be pushing 250 to 260 this year. He caught 44 balls last year after only catching 13 his rookie year. So with McKinnon gone, that's going to increase. He's, as you mentioned, getting better in the 3rd down pass protection. So he might be a 3 down back, and he's not being drafted as such. So everyone, you got to get Pacheco.
Yeah, I agree. I honestly, like, at this point too, like, this is kind of, it checks a lot of boxes, especially because this is going to be an offense that's very good. And I love the fact that he's earned the third down role. Even if the Chiefs, for whatever reason, are playing from behind, it doesn't sound like he's going to lose a lot of those snaps, especially if McKinnon doesn't come back. I don't think anybody else is going to take that role. Absolutely all in on that. That's all we got today, folks. This is the 5 most underrated fantasy players going in rounds 1 and 2. Make sure you follow us and hit the like and subscribe button on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. And make sure you jump over to IG and TikTok and Facebook, apparently, by the way. For all the we're trying to reach more demographics these days, and we're hitting on Facebook now. Go give me a click over there, so I know I'm doing some good on Facebook. We might open up a MySpace account at this point. You know, at this point, if you don't hear me on AOL Instant Messenger, then we're not doing our job. All right, at this point, I'm going to start sending people mail. You know, just a nice written letter about my takes. We're going to do everything for every single demographic. All right, Jeff, before we close out the show, what do you got going on at Razzball? And tell everybody what you got upcoming next.
I'm going to be looking more into our tools here at Razzball that some of you may not be aware of. I've told a lot of my colleagues out of the free tools we have, so doing some more analysis on some of those tools, updating everybody on my Razzball team, which I'm very excited about. I know I'm thinking, hoping me and Sky were talking about having a review of all of our Razzball teams. So hopefully we can get that for our fans here, and just be cranking out more articles and more work. If y'all have questions, concerns, just hit me up on the X.
That's what we love to hear. Make sure you jump over to X, by the way. Check us all out. Jefferson 2_21, and then myself at Bobby LaMarco. Just go follow us. We're doing great. Razzball NFL. Make sure you subscribe to everywhere, folks. If I don't see all your beautiful faces hitting us up, and by the way, we're even on Reddit. We're engaging with everybody. Just join us. We love you. Thanks for joining us once again, folks. We are out of here.